Pepe Escamilla.
Very good.
How are you doing?
Just something.
You want me to sing something?
Please.
I can sing also.
Let's get a little more.
Huh?
Keep talking.
Yeah, yeah,
Still getting
yeah.
feedback, isn't it? So,
But
keep talking, please.
yes, good morning. Welcome to the Roundtable Key Themes on the Future of Education. My name is Pepe Escamilla. We're still getting feedback. Good morning. Maybe it's been said too many times that, that's why we're getting feedback. Echoes from the other tables. Good morning, good morning. ¿Me escuchan bien? Se sigue escuchando feedback. Se acopla, dicen aquí, ¿verdad? Sí. Nosotros decimos que tiene retroalimentación. Sí, se dice mal. No tiene que ver con el stage. La bocina está allá. Es aquí, la blanca. Hola. ¿Mejor? Mejor, creo que no. No. Buenos días. Buenos días, buenos días. Buenos días. Buenos días. Buenos días. Hi. You're in Pyme?
Yes, I'm.
Hi, I'm Pepe Escamilla.
Oh, hi.
Thanks for being on the panel. I was the one who invited you.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you
you.
for the invitation.
Yes.
Thank you.
We're almost ready. I think they need to put.
In case you're wondering, that's not his real voice.
This started. I think you have to get a mic from the guys.
From the back.
Yes. You also, Victoria, no? Yeah, you already have it. Okay. Is the.
Isn't my voice so similar to me?
Okay.
Can you come up on stage just for the sound check?
Okay. And here.
Yeah, we're here.
Yeah. Buenos días. ¿Cómo están? ¿Se escucha? Ahora creo que está un poco mejor. Ya nos está escuchando retroalimentación. ¿No se acopla?
Solo cuando hablas
Un po-
español.
¿Sí? Con acento mexicano. A ver, prueba con acento andaluz, a ver si.
Okay. And
¿Sí?
yes, can you sing? Just for your sound check. You wanna?
Ya, voy a hablar en español.
Yeah, you can all sit if you're panelists. You'd like them on stage.
Ah,
Yeah,
¿sí?
panelists can come to the stage.
Ok.
Yeah, we should start now if we can. We
¿El
need everyone
orden?
on stage, please.
Okay. Do you care where we sit?
Any protocol?
Chair. You want them in order when you're going to call on them? Up to you. You can decide this, Chair.
No Indistinto.
protocol? Okay. I'll see here. Oops.
All right, we're 1 minute late.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
Oh, we speak quick. No worries. And we're all women, so we'll be fine.
No, I tell it. Washington. Yes, yeah. But I don't live there. So quietly, I don't live there. Where are you from? The U.S. Yeah, but my mom is from Thailand, and I've lived abroad most of my
No, that
adult
I
life.
didn't know.
Yes. And you're at Monterey Tech? Yes. Yes, yes. I know Francisco
Hi, I'm
Marmolejo has done a
Annalise.
lot of work with Monterey Tech, yeah. Yes, yes, he's a very good friend, yeah, yeah.
I don't think so.
Yeah, he talks about you all the. He talks about the organization and the university all the time. Monterey Tech is one of the institutions that he talks about. Every, when we're talking about entrepreneurial universities.
Is your test.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, everyone, if you want to say something, Roberta.
I just did. See, yeah.
Hola.
Hola, hola. Good morning. Can you hear me? Yes?
Very nice.
Okay.
All right.
Good morning. Of course.
Bueno, ya no.
It's hard to find it, no? It's hard to find it.
It's okay. Voy a escribir en el grupo. Hay un grupo que se llama UNESCO Barcelona. Escríbelo ahí, porfa. Dile que está moderando aquí el caballero.
So I will make an introduction, a very short presentation, just your names and work titles. And then I will ask you to make your initial statement. So just to give you the heads up, I'm counting to start with you and then go in that direction. Is that okay? Okay. And then
we can see that we agree with everything that has been said.
And then we will pick questions from the audience. Tell me something. What's the official ending time of the panel?
Hour and a half, 11:30, and we are filming. We're starting. So this is
Okay.
online.
Oh, okay. Very good.
Yeah, okay. Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this panel called Key Themes on the Future of Education. My name is José Escamilla. I'm very happy to have a wonderful panel here with me. Let me introduce the people that are in the panel. So I will start on my left with Roberta Male Basset, Global Lead for Tertiary Education and Senior Education Specialist at the World Bank. Roberta, thanks for being here. We have also Mtine McCoy. She's the Commonwealth of Learning Chair in Open Education Resources, Practices and Research, Professor in Open Distance E-Learning at the University of South Africa. Then we have Cristina Del Mastro. She's Vice Provost, Academic Vice Provost of the Catholic University of Peru. Cristina, welcome. We have also Victoria Galan Muros. She's Chief of Research and Analysis at UNESCO ESALC. Victoria, welcome.
Thank you very
And
much.
we also have Annelies Gogger. She's a fellow at the Brooklyn Metro and Brooklyn institutions. Annelies, welcome. Thanks for being here. So the idea of this panel is that we will be speaking about the future of higher education and lifelong learning in universities in general, and the interaction with other providers that could be the private sector or non-governmental organizations. And we define 4 themes to discuss in this panel. I took those themes from the Institute for the Future of Education framework of themes. The first one is fit for purpose, so that education has to be adequate to the needs of students. So we have to be very careful of taking into account the context of students to adequate education and technology, putting the students at the center. The second one is access, so education has to be accessible for the needs and context of students. The third one is inclusion, so we want to include students and lifelong learners and look for the ideal of universal access to education. And the last one is that education has to be relevant and responsive to the needs of the society in the industry. I think I didn't introduce myself, so I will do now. So I am José Escamilla, and I go normally by Pepe, so you can call me Pepe, everyone. So I'm Pepe Escamilla. I'm Associate Director of the Institute for the Future of Education in Tecnológico de Monterrey. So with this, we can start, and so I will give 5 minutes to each of the panelists, and I will start with Roberta for some initial reflections on these themes. Roberta.
Super. Thank you so much, Pepe. Thank you for joining in the room. Thank you for joining online. It's a pleasure to be here representing the World Bank and talking about what is a new emerging focus for us and for many international organizations, which is not just stopping our assessment and understanding of the value of higher education when they complete a degree, but actually thinking about the skills that can be developed through higher education, tertiary education, over the course of a lifetime. So the World Bank presented a new policy advisory framework about 8 months ago, and in that we highlight the very first point that we focused on was this idea of strategically diversified systems and encouraging countries around the world to think about more than universities when they think about what happens and what kind of opportunities are available for students after they complete secondary education. And that does include different forms, different missions, different structures, but also a lifetime of learning. And so this is why I'm really pleased to be here, because we would like all institutions, for a variety of reasons, to consider how they can be part of that ecosystem of a lifetime of learning, a well-articulated system that students can enter and exit at different points and for different needs and to achieve different goals and to be, as you say, very student-determined and student outcome-oriented. I think this is a real innovation if we can get traction around this idea that all of this is about the student. It's not about institutional continuity or this idea of anchoring power in spaces. It's really about providing a learning that takes you through to the goals that you seek to achieve, and that student success as well as access. It's not enough to bring them into the classroom. It's not enough to get them into the institutions. It has to be an outcome that is valuable to them and that's useful to them over the course of a lifetime. So I really value this conversation today. I'm sorry, there's a lot of feedback. Okay, thank you. And then I guess I'll just point out one perspective that we have, which is that this issue varies dramatically around the world, around our clients. We work with countries that have shrinking demographics, especially Eastern Europe, especially wealthier countries that are facing institutional stability challenges because there are fewer and fewer students in the age cohort going to school. Lifelong learning is a way to stabilize those institutions and to reinforce opportunities for populations that maybe have missed tertiary education. Women who married early or didn't finish or weren't included in that pipeline to finish secondary education can go back and become part of the learning environment and also part of the economic environment when they have opportunities to rejoin the workforce. And so repurposing institutions to serve the needs of their society and recognizing the value in that is something really important. And in other parts of the world, we see expanded mass issues around access. Their populations are growing that have the capacity to achieve higher education. There's no place for them to go. And then we look at that as well. If they get missed in the first round, can we catch them later? Are there places that in institutional formats that can grab them? So I really look forward to this conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you, Roberta. Tina?
Okay, thank you very much for the invitation. I really appreciate it. Thank you, colleagues, and good morning to those who are joining us online. And the day is not over until the sun sets. So we are at the right place. Maybe I should start by contextualizing who I am and where I come from. My name is Mpine Makwe. I come from the University of South Africa. The University of South Africa is one of the largest universities in the world, and it's one of the first universities to provide higher education in distance. So I have been a distance education institution for a very long time. And throughout history, we have produced many people because, as you are aware, there were many people who did not have access to higher education. And the University of South Africa provided that opportunity for people to have access to and also succeed. That's why we have very high-level alumni from this institution. So for us, distance education has been a way of enabling access. It has been a way of being inclusive because then it addresses issues of inclusion. And when we talk about lifelong learning, that's where we are. Because for many years, our students' population, the age group that was there, the average age was 35. So we have from 18 to 82. So our graduation ceremonies are quite interesting because you see people of different age groups going through the table. So we have been basically how we were created. We were created to do that. And then when technology came, and as you know that distance education has been the trailblazer with technology. So from technology when it was radio, then television, then now internet and computers, we have used all those technologies to enable our learning. We have about 380,000 students, and in the college that I lead, I'm a dean in the college. In the college that I lead, we have 100,000 teacher educators, and we train both teachers who are in service and those that are out of service. So lifelong learning is our prime thing that we do. So many of them, yes, are the ones who aspire to be teachers. So our role really is to ensure that the teachers that we produce are not only relevant, because if you don't produce a right teacher, the education system will continue to collapse. So we believe that we are mother of all professions. That's what we call ourselves. So every person has to go through our teacher education program. So then on my other life, I'm also in Open Education Resources Chair for the Commonwealth of Learning. And that, what it entails is that we believe that anything that has been produced with public funds, it must be publicly available. So we put things for free online so that people can have access to these resources and quality resources at that. Because people tend to think that when you go in an online space, the quality is compromised. It's not. Actually, it's a better quality than the one who teaches in front of a class and they're the only people who knows, it's him and the students who know what they teach. And who don't even have an opportunity of peers to check out what they teach. But for us, it's out there, and everybody has an opportunity to teach. And then in this program, and the reason maybe I'm invited here is because I am a TEG leader for the theme on futures of education, of higher education. And I've developed a background paper that is based on that, on the futures of higher education. So that's why I think you invited me. Maybe?
I think so.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Pina.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now I give the floor to Cristina.
Good morning, I am Cristina del Mastro, Academic Vice President of Pontificia Universidad Católica del Perú. Thank you for your invitation. I will present some ideas about the university facing the future, pedagogical and technological approaches. The university mission has been changing lately within the framework of sustainable development goals and the social, technological, and environmental changes. The university contributes to the education of ethical and professional citizens who are democratic and socially responsible. To accomplish this mission, we consider the following pedagogical principles as key aspects: to place the student and their learning in the center of the educational process. Learning should be authentic and centered in a context, many contexts. Learning should be cooperative, to learn from and with others, developing social and communicated skills to cooperate when solving complex and interdisciplinary problems. Learning should be oriented toward the production of knowledge and global problem solution, showing an ethical and civic behavior. An emotional environment that promotes mental health and welfare of students will contribute to improving their learning. Flexibility should be essential in higher education, seen from pedagogical, technological, and curriculum dimensions. The university contributes to lifelong learning. It must be inclusive, providing opportunities to learn in different society groups and learning stages. It's necessary to consider the pedagogical principles placing learning as the core and the choosing technologies and resources that result in a better education. When we incorporated technology, we need to consider that it may cause different effects. The first one is to benefit the access of a student to learning resources. The second one is when the teaching learning process is improved when incorporated technology. The third and the most profound effect is to totally change or redesign the process, having the active, collaborative, and autonomous learning as the basis. When incorporated technology, we must be flexibility, analyzing possible combinations of different dimensions like the following proposed by Diaz, Villa, and Galvez. dimensions like space and time in which learning takes place. Space can be on-site or distance, and interaction can be synchronous or asynchronous. Learning environments we can study at home, in a classroom, or online. Means to gain knowledge, active, interactive, or expository. Those who control the process could be the professor or the students. The learning experience could be formal or non-formal, and the type of pedagogy, a more conventional or flipped learning. Using this dimension, we will design different pedagogical options that will have an impact on our students' learning process at a course of curriculum level. To conclude, we need to incorporate the social and emotional dimension in the academic field and university. But mainly is the central focus in the human and comprehensive education. It is important to provide students' welfare and mental health support to ensure the full development of work and professional citizens emotionally stable and socially committed with the mission of our universities. Thank you.
Thank you, Cristina. Now I give the floor to Victor.
Thanks very much, Pepe. Pleasure for me to be here, and I guess I'm on these very inspiring, powerful women. So good job putting the panel together.
I just look for the best.
Then, yeah, okay. I wanted to start highlighting that this is the third day in which we are here, just listening to people speaking about all sort of different topics around higher education. I guess at least me need a bit of time, yes, to start digesting everything that I've heard, to also watch some of the sessions that we can be present. There's so many at the same time. But I just want to highlight the critical moment that we are right now. Would like to think that COVID, or the worst of COVID, has passed, but we're still unsure about how the future is going to be. So I have the feeling that we are kind of live building or putting building blocks into how higher education into the future is going to be. And I think it's a great opportunity that so many people can gather together here from all over the world to start just bringing little pieces of a puzzle that hopefully we're bringing together. But if I think about the future, there's been some elements that have been put on the table in the last few days that I guess we all agree with. University has to be more inclusive, have to be more flexible, have to be more connected, and I guess we all agree with that. However, if we go to the next step, I believe we need to start talking about the how. How do we do that? Because that is not clear. I don't have the answers about how this should happen, and probably it should happen differently in different universities. So maybe, I'm just putting a maybe here, and this is a purely personal opinion. Later today, for example, they're going to be presenting a roadmap, a very high-level roadmap that needs to be valid for everyone. Then what I was already suggesting is that why don't we take that roadmap to the regions, like world regions, and then we try to bring it down a little bit. But then we need to encourage governments or university associations to take it to a national level. And eventually, I mean, it's a long cascade. Yes, it's going to take a while, but eventually then universities can take it home. But I believe that maybe given some sort of playbook or saying this is how, I mean, can we help people to build their own future? Because at the end of the day, I believe that it has to be different. If I have to highlight one single thing envisioning the university of the future, I'd probably highlight collaboration. I see the university of the future as a collaborative one. And it means collaboration with pretty much anyone. Collaboration between universities. Universities need each other, there's no doubt about that. It's not just that the students are really eager to get international experiences, but even universities that are within the same city. I mean, I've seen more and more initiatives that universities that are literally just meters away, that were completely different universe, that now they're talking. Because now they feel, hey, we need each other. And again, it goes beyond the students. It could be also academics, so academic mobility as well can happen, and should happen. But also beyond that, and universities are really struggling, for example, to get lecturers for everything that is related with STEM. There are really not many experts in artificial intelligence and machine learning and all these technologies that say we all need. Where are the experts? They are in industry. They pay better. Universities can compete with that. So the few that remains at university, why should remain in one university? Can we share those people somehow? I'm trying, I'm putting ideas out there. It's definitely not a UNESCO formal statement in any way. This is my personal just view and just putting ideas out there. But I do see that cooperation between universities, it's unquestionable. Again, it will be about how, but it won't be about whether anymore. Universities can act along going forward. Mm-hmm. Cooperation with industry, business, we'll talk about it, but considering skill gaps, then there is no way in which universities and industry don't talk to each other about designing the curriculum or even delivering it, just because many experts are in industry, bring them in, whether this is as a guest professor or as a guest lecturer or as an industry professor or anything in between, they can be brought together to make the curriculum more relevant. But also with governments. I guess if we have learned something, and we've learned a lot in the last 2 years in all sort of ways, at least for me, one very important learning is that when difficult times happened, and it was interesting seeing some governments looking at universities, saying, oops, what do we do? And then universities being the policy advisor and say, hey, we have experts not just in public health, not just in microbiology, but also in sociology, in psychology, in urban planning, because everything needed to change. And some governments really rely on universities for that, and particularly those that already have a relationship. At the same time, we saw all the governments that didn't and acted differently. And I think university proved its value in those countries in which they were heard, about how can different experts of different disciplines come together and really be good, neutral, objective, high-level advisors of governments. It might not be a partnership, but it's definitely a relationship with their own students. I'd love to see how universities in the future take students more seriously, if I can say it like that. I saw great examples when I started working with the Commission and I went to the Nordic countries. I saw examples of universities that says, this is all decided by students. Oh, these startup hubs, this is done by students, and this place here, it's run by students. And I looked at them and said, they are 18-year-old kids. No, they are the future leaders, and you need to start treating them as such when they are 18 already. So sometimes we continue treating them as just students and just kids that still have a lot to learn. If we start giving them some responsibility, not just on their own learning, but even beyond that, we'll find out that they grow much more, that their university experience is much better, that they learn beyond the module in each class, and they develop a lot of transversal skills as well, have a much different experience. I don't want to get too long with this, but society. We cannot ignore that beyond business and beyond around students, society is there. Just to be concrete about examples, I think this is particularly important in non-urban or rural areas where university is the only, or maybe there is even one university in the whole region. I've seen great examples in which there is one university in a large geographical area, and that university is the only one that can really make some things happen in terms of lifelong learning, for example, in terms of trying to solve or help solving local, regional problems through science, in terms of opening the infrastructure, maybe incubators and support entrepreneurs even beyond their own students and staff, and really acting as engines of local and regional development. And I think that's something that some universities still don't see as their role, but they have a huge potential untapped. And I will shut up there. I'll do for like an initial statement and give the word to Annalise here. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Victoria. When you were talking about university collaboration, it reminded me of Pablo Navas, who was at that time the president of the Universidad de los Andes in Colombia. He was in our conference on International Innovation in Education in Monterrey. And he claimed that the biggest innovation for universities will be collaboration. That was a little bit prophetic because it was like 4 years ago. And I have seen, as you said, many, I made a small joke, I said many consortiums that were on artificial life that were reborn during because we needed each other. And that's one possible good outcome of this process we have had. Now I go to Annalise to close the initial statements.
Thank you, Pepe. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Annalise Skoger, and I'm a fellow at Brookings, in Brookings Metro. And my background is mostly in workforce policy and work-based learning. So what brings me to the conference is actually a research project I've been doing looking at how technology is shaping education and interactions with the labor market. So whether that's digital badges and boot camps, or if it could be someone going on a platform to get jobs that normally wouldn't have been available to them. How is this changing how people interact and go between learning and working? And so the landscape report that we just published, which is called Learning and Working in the Digital Age, it's on the Brookings website now if you want to take a look at it. But basically, one of the things that we learned in talking to people that are active in this technology space, which is very confusing and hard to engage with for many people, is just that tech actually isn't there to replace higher ed or to replace academic, but the question is, how do you actually use technology to scale access to education to groups that normally wouldn't have access to it? And someone mentioned the challenge of getting faculty that have the expertise and being able to pay them a competitive wage. So the question is, well, how could you make sure that if you put it on a platform, then maybe that one person can actually reach a lot more people? And then another key point we've learned is, the pandemic has really accelerated connectivity more than in the last decade in 1 year. But at the same time, I think what we've seen is actually that we're going in the opposite direction of the Sustainable Development Goals, in the sense that 2.9 billion people have still never ever used the internet. And so if we can't deal with not just the connectivity problems, but the digital literacy issues, we really risk leaving even more people farther behind. And so what we're seeing in the use of technologies for education and learning and labor markets is that it tends to be the people that already are pretty familiar with the technology, already have some education, that are benefiting the most and using those tools the most, even though those who are more marginalized probably have the most to gain. And so there's a disconnect here, and also a disconnect between who develops the technology and where it's being developed, and who can benefit the most from it. And then the other kind of big picture around technology that I want to focus on is the real urgency to think about global open source standards for these platforms. Because if you think about the internet, and when we created the internet, the reason we all can go online and not have 15 different or 4 different online universes to engage with is because there are standards. And what we're risking here is that we'll end up getting these different pockets of monopolies that are controlling proprietary access to this learning. And it will be expensive, and it will be challenging for innovation to happen within that. So the critical point we're at right now is, how do we make sure that there are some standards and norms that are established so that these systems can interact with each other and that it keeps the cost and accessibility as a top priority. And the other really critical issue are a framework for data rights. So if you're going to bring people that are vulnerable into platforms that don't really know how to use their data or how it's going to be used, how do you really focus on making sure that we're protecting people's digital privacy and making sure that their data aren't being misused? Because it's great to be like, oh, now you can have access to all this stuff, but then what if that data is exploited? And then I want to reemphasize just quickly the collaboration point, because I think that scaling lifelong learning, it means working less in silos. So higher education isn't this thing over here that you go away and do and then you go into the real world. But actually, it's about engaging employers first and foremost, because employers are the ones who are going to need their workers to learn and to keep learning. If they want to keep up and they want to innovate, they're the ones that have to play a larger role in making sure that this education happens. And that's also how you can have access to that expertise that you can't actually pay for. And so there's ways in which partnerships with employers are absolutely critical for making sure that people have access to opportunity in the future. Another key is supportive services. So let's say you are a mother and you went and you haven't had access to higher ed. If you have children, you're going to need childcare. So how do you coordinate with these different supportive services, whether it's transportation, childcare, housing, making sure that people who have other things going on in their lives actually have access to what they need to actually finish that learning, that their learning goals. And then finally, how do you make sure that when you're in a ministry or in government that you're building policy that isn't putting technology in at the end or as this appendage, but is actually building those policies with technology at the table, with the end users at the table, and with all these different actors engaged in every process, in each stage of the process, because it won't, if it doesn't make sense for the users and the value isn't clear to them, or if it's incomprehensible how to use a digital wallet, for example, then it's not going to go anywhere. And if technology can't be brought in the beginning, then you're going to have something built, a policy built, that actually can't be implemented. Or you'll miss opportunities where tech could actually improve what you're doing with your policy, but you didn't know it was possible because you don't understand what's possible and what's not in the technology. So I think collaboration extends also to sort of the policy side of how we respond to the changes.
Thank you, Annalise. Thanks a lot. So I see a lot of things in common, and I would like to take back this idea of Victoria that we discussed on the Barcelona Pact session that we had the other day about creating something like a playbook, the house, because we have talked a lot about the what's, but we haven't talked about the house. I don't think it's a universal thing. I think it's more like principles that we should apply. And I really believe that one big transformation will be for universities to think of putting the student at the center, really at the center, and thinking that all the things that we do have to be in order for them to develop, thrive, and be successful. So, and it will depend, it will be very different from students from different contexts and universities whose mission is completely different. And that will make a big difference. On Monday, I was reading a statistic of around 55% of the students in higher education in Latin America drop out of the educational system. So it's not only to include them in the system, but to make sure that we do everything for them to be successful. And it's a combination of those factors, and we have to be less willing to change, and I think that's part of the things that are difficult. So around this, and if we keep this idea of the house, I would like to ask first Empina and then Cristina, what do you think are those pedagogical and technological approaches that we need in universities in this playbook, in this possible playbook, that will lead to effective learning?
Okay. Thank you, Pepe, for that. I was really listening attentively to the issues of technology and pedagogy and how they play out. I think the starting point is for us to understand what our identity is. We are first and foremost a university or higher education institution, and our role is to develop capacity. And by developing capacity, we are going to be dealing with the world that we are developing capacity for, the community that we are working for. And it is in that space that we need to see how technology fits into what we do, not technology shaping what we are doing. We need to do it the other way around. And as much as COVID assisted us to move very quickly into the technological space, we found ourselves in an emergency space rather than in a space where we are in charge, where we are saying this is what we want technology to do for us, not what technology should be doing. And the other issue that we do is that we took technology and we used it the same way as we would use it in a classroom. And that doesn't work. When you teach using technology, it's a different way of focusing. It's a different way of teaching. It's a design principle. It's the way you design the study material. And probably from ODL environment, we design study material, we design learning, we design assessment. And because this is a design of the pedagogy, it is important for us not to transfer what we do on a face-to-face, like what we do now, to an online space, because that is a different environment. And a lot of other issues that have been raised, especially collaboration. The reason that I think we struggle with collaboration in higher education is because we are not collaborative in nature. We bring in students into this setting, but we don't teach them anything about teamwork, how to work in teams. What we do, we teach them to be competitive. And competition is about individuals. Who gets the best mark, who's the number one, who's whatever. And then we set them out into the world where they are supposed to be working in teams, and they can't function. Because then they get into a work environment, and they look at a work environment as a competition with very strange behaviors. Yesterday, yeah, it's competition with very strange behaviors that goes to extreme. Yesterday in this room, was it yesterday or day before yesterday? But anyway, in this room, we watched a video of young people across, and it was an ISALC project, where they interviewed young people who were in high school, and I was very keen on hearing what they're saying about the future of education, because that's what we forget, that we are here for the student, and it's important to hear them out. They were not talking about disciplines, by the way. You would think that students would say, well, I want to be a doctor or an engineer or whatever. They looked at the future in a very different way, and they were talking about humanity. Mm-hmm. They talked about values that education systems should impart to them. They were talking about issues of inclusivity, issues of equality. And you would think that, well, so we are married to disciplines. And we feel that in an engineer degree, this is what they need to learn. But no. Teach them how to learn, they will learn anything. Teach them who to be human, and they will be human. Teach them to know and to take ownership of their goals in life. And they will do that. But don't teach them what is chemistry, all those things will happen in this process. And part of the reason that students see that we are not responsive, in South Africa, they even went out into the street to strike against the education system, because it was not addressing their needs. It was not being responsive. When they graduate, they can't find a job. And when they're in the university, they are treated like children, as we are saying. So I think in this project that I worked for at UNESCO on the futures of higher education, I looked at all these possibilities, but I came to a conclusion that we need to strategically rethink what higher education is looking for. And that's come to the how part of it. I proposed a methodology of the future's ways of thinking. And it's a systematic way of thinking. It's not just conjuring up some kinds of images, but you need to be systematic about it. You need to look at how the past influence the present and how the present will influence the future. And in between, what is it that we need to get rid of and what is it that we need to take forward? Because what we do is that we carry these legacies and we are so married to the legacy and moving forward becomes difficult. So it is important for us to say no to certain practices that we are familiar with. And it's difficult because we are not wired like that. We all want our comfort zone. But this is the time that we should move away from the comfort zone if we want to address the future that we aspire for as people. So we need to rethink about what higher education should look like. And there's a methodology to do that. There's a method, a way of doing it. And once we address that, then we are able to say, now we are at this point, now it's time to move forward. There are trends that are coming in. Technology is a trend. In Africa, there is a growing need for higher education, and there are no spaces. And we can't continue to having universities with 4 walls that cannot accommodate those multitudes. We must come up with a creative way of ensuring that these people are educated. Lifelong learning is one of those things. Whether we are doing it in the morning or in the afternoon or at night, we need to start opening our doors a bit wider, rather than being an elite system that higher education was created to be. We can't. We really cannot be, and we cannot afford to, if we want to move forward in the future we aspire for. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I agree with you, what you said, and I highlight that in education in general, I will not say only higher education, we tend to be very focused on knowledge and not on the development of competencies, real competencies. Both disciplinary and I think non-disciplinary are even more disregarded. So we should be less encyclopedic, no, and more focused on the development of the competencies, particularly in those called sometimes soft skills, that I prefer to call them power skills because they're so important.
Are power skills.
One of them is lifelong learning how to learn, as you said, but collaboration and other skills. And if you look into the university's mission, whatever, they will say that we develop learning how to learn skills. But when you look at the curriculum and the things that happen at the university, most of the time there's not anything explicitly that's looking at measuring that, developing that, nurturing that. So it's very important for those futures of higher education that you were talking about. Now, Cristina, do you want to address the same question?
¿Voy a hablar en español? Is possible? Because
but if you make it really short, I could translate, but it has to be really short because I'm not
I write some ideas, but I prefer comment with my language. No, lo que señalan creo que es muy importante un cambio de cultura, ¿no? en la academia, porque está muy concentrada en la transmisión de conocimientos.
It's very important to make a change of culture in academia because it's very concentrated on transmitting knowledge.
Exacto. Y esta cultura de la colaboración no coincide con esta, digamos, cultura de los rankings, de la competencia, entonces hay que cambiar, ¿no? En ese sentido creo que coincido contigo con el tema de las habilidades fuertes, no blandas, ¿no? Y creo que es muy importante que los estudiantes se puedan sensibilizar con respecto a los problemas globales, ¿no? Y poderles dar las herramientas para que generen un pensamiento analítico y crítico y propositivo para ir resolviendo, ¿no?
So she agrees with the idea of the problem of competition in universities, and she calls the soft skills hard skills instead of, and those are very important for students to thrive later in work. Thank you, Cristina. So now I will go to ask, maybe we can also put some questions of the public in the middle to make it more interactive. Also, if someone has a question, can raise a hand. And well, I will give you time to think about that. And I want now to go to different questions. So we know that we are having a lot of changes in the society in terms of work, the needs of the industry, business transformation, Industry 4.0. So I would like Victoria and then Roberta to tell me, how do you think that education, higher education, lifelong learning can meet those changing needs quickly? How can we develop systems that are more flexible? Higher education is very structured, cycles of change are, if they are small, it's every 5 years, sometimes 10 years. So how can we develop systems that are more flexible, that adapt better to those changing needs of industry and society?
Okay, maybe I'll let Roberta start. She spoke right at the beginning, and maybe I can only say I agree with you when you finish.
Doubtful, but thank you. Because I entered this conversation from an unusual place, I think, in an academic conversation, because the World Bank, I mean, we are the implementing agency and technical support providers for countries around the world as they are making these transitions. They're investing a lot of money, and they're asking these questions. And so, you know, there's a privilege that I have and that my teams have to watch this in action when countries are actively, aggressively trying to solve these problems. I take maybe a different perspective on this relationship with the employers, because there has never been an employer survey done in the history of employer surveys that says they're satisfied with the education that's coming out of universities. It's never, ever happened. It will never, ever happen. Because what they're asking for is an education that caters explicitly to their industry, not even just their industry, their business. Right? I'm getting graduates that can't do X. But for decades, there was training on the job. There was an investment in the worker to keep capacity building on the job. That changed a lot, because now we know individuals will have 4 or 5 independent careers over the course of their lifetime. They won't even stay in the same field. They'll change fields, they'll change. So the relationship with the worker has changed. I say all this because universities are full, and I've said this whole week, of the smartest people you'll find in society. You all can do better at saying why you are great at training people. There are just exceptional workers in every, and not just universities, in higher technical institutes and community college that are mission-driven and doing exceptional things. But higher education is often on the defensive. They're always defending what they're doing or trying to explain why you can be better at the messaging, and I'm really working with our colleagues to do that, because I actually don't think there's a wholesale revolution that's needed in higher education. I think it is, there are pieces that are working exceptionally well, and those should be strengthened. There is the recognition, I think, absolutely, of putting students more centered in this, that it isn't necessarily about research competition, which I think many of you would agree for the last 20 years was maybe driving the narrative of higher education. It was about research, research, research. And with COVID, it's been again about students, which I think has been a really important pivot. But this interaction with industry is obviously very important. The challenge for many of you, and you may know this, is if you have a private sector that's almost non-existent in your country, and the public sector is 80% of the employers for your graduates, there needs to be an ecosystem that's about innovation and integration with the banking system, so that they're lending for small, medium enterprises, right? It's an extension into society beyond the bilateral industry institution, right? It takes it to another level, which is, how do they access financing? What are the regulatory frameworks that determine whether someone can start a new business? Is there a safety net for those who start a business and fail at that business? Is it okay to fail? Is there a way for them not to bottom out in society? So I say that, it's a narrative that has to be inclusive of a lot more actors than the ones that we're talking about right now. It's not just industry and institutions, it's industry, institutions, and the full array of policymakers and the full array of effective mechanisms to create an ecosystem that is robust enough to embrace these types of changes and reforms for students and for a lifetime of successful living, successful economic development, and successful people.
Thank you, Roberta.
Let me say that I agree completely with what Roberta has said. Let me just build on something specific. You say, what about these universities if there's no industry around? I'll say, you create it. I have these examples of a university in Europe. You can say, oh, Europe have industry. Well, it's not always the case, and it has not always been the case. This is university in the Netherlands, the University of Twente. Up to 1970s, there was a large textile industry in the area. So they were fine, and they were prosperous. But in the 70s, it was not, I guess, profitable to have a textile industry in Europe anymore. It was all outsourced. So suddenly a whole region had no industry, like at all. And I think it's a very good example because then the university and the government came together and said, well, it's just the two of us, no, we need another helix. So then the university decided, okay, if we don't have industry, we're going to create it. So they focus on entrepreneurship, and they say, we are going to create entrepreneurs, and we need you, government, as a partner to create good conditions so they stay here, because we need to start from scratch. We are not even interested to attract all the industry. Why would you want to come here? But we need to create our own industry. And as today, this university is known as the entrepreneurial university in Europe, not only with their students through startups, but also with their academics through spin-offs. Some of the largest companies that you might know, like Booking.com, they are startups from this university that today are huge international companies. And so that's why when universities, I talk to universities about their engagement, I say, yeah, but we have no industry. My first thing to them is like, well, it's the hard way, it's the long way, but maybe you need to create it. And about this collaboration and so how are we aware, how can we connect better? I go back to the collaboration point. If you already have a relationship with industry, with government, with society, if that fluent cooperation is there, communication, then you as a university are aware of what's going on there, what's going on. Having said this, and maybe there's no need to say, but I always want to make it clear, this is where university autonomy and academic freedom is never compromised. We're not talking about doing what someone else say, we're talking about listening. We're talking about being aware, giving a chair on the table, and they tell you, university, this is our struggles, this is what we want, or this is what we would like to, and then you as a university and you as a lecturer make the final decision about what are you going to do with that information. That doesn't mean that there's no excuse for not listening to them. This could be from curriculum design, for example. I am an academic myself as well. I still do some teaching, and it seems that we are scared of just opening up our syllabus and our methodologies and say, please tell me what I can do better, or what am I doing wrong? I mean, why not? And again, then it's your decision, but opening that up is extremely useful. Actually, I worked for a few years in a University of Applied Sciences in Germany, and for us, if we wanted to create curriculum, it was compulsory to do this consultation and to report on the consultation and to say, okay, I've consulted these companies, these governments, this is what they've said, and from that information, I've taken this for this reason, I have not taken this for this reason, and it's okay, but we have to justify it. And I think that's an excellent practice. It doesn't happen in many ways. In many places, sorry. If we go to delivery, sometimes we're not the best in delivering everything. Sometimes we want our students to hear from someone who is in industry or who is in government. Bring them in. Why not? Guest lectures, the practical part of your course, bring all the people in to complement ourselves. We don't have to be, it doesn't say any less about us. Probably it says more. We're humble enough to recognize that our students' experience will be better, and we bring all the people in. Particularly useful for and I'm sorry that I jump back to the design, is if we have our alumni. They've been here, they've enjoyed or suffered that curriculum before. Why don't we ask them? They're always happy to give feedback, because then they go to the labor market and they are very well aware of what was useful, of what they learned, and what wasn't. So who better than them? But then for that, an alumni network, it's very useful, and this is very common in Anglo-Saxon countries, not so much in others. Alumni network doesn't cost much, so it's always very useful to count on them. In order to be aware of what the labor market need, let me tell you something that I've heard often. So when companies, because this is responsibilities on both sides, when companies go to university, what universities complain about is that industry is usually not able to put in words or clear words what do they need, not for now, and sometimes they do as well, but for the future, because they are on their operations, they are into the day-to-day. So maybe this is also an invitation for companies to think also strategically as much as possible about their future needs. So then when they go and talk to university, they can talk about their future needs. If you talk about what you need today, the university is going to be late. So there's always going to be this gap, in like time gap. So that would be useful, and that was one of the main results of a survey that we did a few years ago as well. And I don't want to extend myself too much, but then probably if we want to be aware of what's going on, and usually in countries that academics are lecturers and researchers at the same time, if in your research capacity you're also in contact with governments, with society, with industry, you are naturally going to be aware of what is going on, which you can also implement, in both, in your teaching and in your research as well. And if there is any chance to share any infrastructure, to have these common spaces to meet that, hubs, whoever builds them and wherever they are, this also facilitates a lot of random in the good sense, encounters over a coffee. That means that people establish these informal relationships and they just talk, and when they talk and people know each other, that also a very important information flow in a much more informal setting, among other things.
Thanks, Victoria.
Thank you.
Now I go to Annelies, your work on lifelong learning or learning and work. And what's the point of view that we have from Roberta and Victoria are very, I think, focused more on higher ed. What will be your reflection on those kind of environments?
Yeah, I think building on what was already said, one of the things I think a lot about is how, it's not that we need to get rid of academic learning that's conceptual and theoretical in nature. We're always going to need, especially for the top tier of people that are going to be the real sort of intellectual, sort of theoretical leaders, there's always going to be a need for that. I think where there's a huge gap, if you think about technology deploying into every job, and we're talking about retail jobs, we're talking about janitorial jobs, transportation jobs, mechanics, everyone's going to have to learn new things and interact with new technologies. And if we're really thinking about getting people to a higher level of learning when they're already working, then we need to really build multiple pathways that are not tracked, so you can get recognized learning from one in the other. And we need to really be able to do blended learning, where someone spends part of their time in the classroom and part of their time on the job, so that they're taking the more foundational things they're learning in the classroom and applying it to the problems in their industry. And I think that's where the biggest growth is going to be for demand, which is things like cybersecurity. You can't learn that in a classroom alone. You have to be out there in the trenches, whether it's in healthcare or in finance. It might be really different challenges that you're trying to solve, different legal frameworks. You have to be able to blend those two, and we don't have those pathways that are strong enough institutionally. And so that is where, and businesses need to be like collaborating around. It's not just like, what is my equipment that I need someone trained on, but I need to teach someone how to teach themselves new equipment when I roll it out, right? And that's the foundational level. So that's the partnership between education and employers that we need to work towards. And there's really a role for government, I think, to help make sure there are institutional structures to convene those actors and make sure that that happens in a more regular, normative way. And then in addition, when someone is working and learning, they're getting paid, which makes it more accessible. And so how do you make sure that, it's getting past this idea of like, you just go after high school, you go to college, right? And you know, in the U.S., that is extremely expensive. At least, you know, we have student debt debates right now every single day because whole generations of people can't get their life started because they're saddled with debt. And that's the choice that people are navigating. And at this point, a lot of them are saying, I'm not going to take out that debt because I don't know if I'm going to have a job at the other end. So it's different in different countries, but I think the ability to earn while you're learning is an option for extending opportunity to more learners. And then the final point, someone was mentioning businesses, and I do agree. So small and medium-sized businesses not only employ the most people, but they are also the engine of innovation, right? So when you have a strong, medium-sized business that is growing fast, one of the biggest challenges they have is that they can't onboard enough people with the right qualifications and get them up to speed quickly enough. So there's a real sweet spot there for supporting and making sure that those businesses have better learning structures in place inside their company. They engage with education, because large companies, they have overhead to do their own training. But it's those growing, medium-sized companies, when we did research, that's where, when you invest in some incentives for them to train, they've delivered more jobs and more revenue for the company. So it's good for the workers and it's good for the business. And oftentimes the managers just don't even have the skills themselves to know how to manage people in a learning environment, right? So how do you invest in management training and supervisory training in those growing businesses that don't really have the money yet to like actually hire an internal HR team? That's really I think, because once you can do that, you can kind of catapult on of existing energy to innovate and make it go farther.
Thank you, Annalise. One reflection on what you said, and connecting with the universities connected more to the needs of the markets and the industry. In our TEC 21 educational model in TEC de Monterrey, it's a competency-based educational model. The students spend around 50% of the time solving challenges, real-world challenges, from governments, enterprises, NGOs, and those challenges are developed by faculty, at least 2 faculty, because of different disciplines, because the world is not divided in silos, so from one discipline. And the students, you get the students very engaged and they develop competencies, and then we can see the portfolio for the development of the competencies of the students. But also the faculty gains because they are in contact with the, let's say, the real world, no? So they're forced to go and learn what are the new things and what are the problems they have, and they start to solve their problems, and they can really address that on their curriculum. So it's one of the ways that can be an engaging way or flexible way of being in contact with the needs of the market in the industry. So I would like to know if there's someone that wants to ask a question. I have a lot of more questions, but we are already, we have only 25 minutes, and maybe we can have more interaction. Is there a microphone for? Okay, so there's one hand here and another one there. Please, short questions and short answers to see if we can get more.
Thank you so much. This is a fantastic discussion going on. Just to make a very, very short comment. There is a need also to put the discussion into a more higher level in terms of the type of university we need for the society we want. I mean, the discussion about flexibility, diversification, nearness to the society is critical, but underlying that is a broader discussion about how the university embed into a social transformation idea. I mean, that is, we cannot avoid that discussion because it's diversification or flexibility or open resources, but for what? For what kind of citizen, for what kind of person, for what kind of society? And this is, and I finish, this is not only related to the role of the universities, but also how universities have been framed historically towards society. Historically, universities have a very strong transformative discourse with many pros and cons. many ways that we can see that. But it's not replicating the past of how university transformed a society or contribute. There has to be a new narrative of the transformation of education to society and society to education.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you. Melchor Sanchez from the National University of Mexico. I would like to hear your thoughts about, if education is so important, the basic fundamental concepts of education should be in the top list of things that everybody involved in education should be continuously learning. For example, in every academic meeting that I have been in my life, including this one, many of the slides, not that slide, but many of the slides of the presenter violate consistently all the cognitive science principles to convey information. So I love the concept of evidence-based education and evidence-informed education. How can we, as educators, keep up to date with the enormous amount of educational research that is produced every day, and that we're supposed to have that, you will update your skills. You are a physician, I am a pediatrician, so you have to continuously study medicine. But how about continuously study the education? Because if you want to learn the more useful skills to teach communication, teamwork, etc., that is usually not on the top of our minds, because there's all this information in the in the libraries, digital databases of beautiful studies that can help us be better educators. So I would like to hear your thoughts about how can we be better, and our faculty, better lifelong learners about education.
Thank you, Melchor. Someone wants to address that?
Okay.
Okay.
Empina, please.
Oh,
go ahead.
All right, thank you very much.
Short answer so that you have more time for introduction. Okay.
Yes. Thanks for that. But I think you are right. We need to strategically reset our own thinking, because we think that we don't need to participate in lifelong learning, and we do. And that's why every time we continue going back to our disciplines as a protector. We don't want to expose ourselves that there are certain things that we don't know. And that's why we are not even allowing our students to teach us things, because I think there's a lot to learn from students, because they come with a different view of doing things. And maybe if we listen to them, then the world will be a better place where there is an exchange of ideas. That yes, I have given you this, but what is it that you are giving me back? But this approach of I know best, and therefore you have to hear me out at all times. It's what you see, that every slide is about, this is what we need to do, this is what we need to do, but not the other way around, in terms of what is it that I need to learn from you. And it's a humbling experience, by the way, to allow someone to tell you what to do.
No.
Thank you.
I agree with what Empina was saying. Sometimes this thing of academic freedom means that we don't even expose ourselves. No, we need to know better. I don't have an answer for you, Melchor. I'm struggling with my own lifelong learning and what's trying to catch up with everything that is going on. But what is clear is that we need a more systematic and structured approach to it that starts by being humble enough to say we do not know everything. I would like to quickly address, and this is again a personal opinion because it's a very deep root question, like what is the type of university that we want or that we need and for whom. My personal opinion on that is that we talk about the university as a one university. I do not believe there is or there should be one university. I am very pro higher education or higher education institutions in which you have top research-focused institutions in which we put our hopes that the radical innovation come from, and they're really, they're going to do a lot of blue sky research. Some of it, might stay somewhere, but then something is going to happen. Something's going to happen, and it's going to change the world. We need those organizations. We need those organizations that think about the world as being the place, they work with and they can impact, like they play field. But we do definitely need that university that I talked before, that is the only university in a region that is fully focused on employability, on connection with the different actors in the region. That is that platform that I'd like to think independent and an objective platform that bring together all these actors and that, focus on that. And I do believe the higher education system should be broad enough to embrace this diversity. So that's why I wouldn't have one answer for you, because for each of those types, I guess, there is a space. And that would be, my initial thoughts on that.
Thank you.
Can I offer a quick thought on
go
that?
ahead.
The colleague from UNAM, the one thing I think that hasn't come up very much, at least not in my days here, is about the academic professional pipeline and the training of PhDs and how we train them and what their career opportunities are when they exit their PhD programs. There are systems around the world where it's very top-heavy. There are a lot of professors who hold on to those positions for a long time, and there's not a lot of room for the new staff who will come in with these new ideas, who have been trained in this new model, who've grown up with technology, who are just more adept in some of these things, for the academic staff to be learning from each other about this. So what you can get isn't necessarily learning from each other yourselves, right? Professors teaching professors how to have professional development is just replicating the same environment of learning that you exist in. It is the diversification of the academic profession so that there are more thoughts, more ideas, the pluralism of populations, where they've come from, that can enrich how the academic profession is building those skills that are more modern and changing or adaptive to what's happening in the external environment as well. There's not a lot going on, I think, talking about what happens with PhD training right now.
Thank you, Roberta.
And I just have one comment about sort of the overarching values shifting. And one of the things that I think about a lot is how when only higher ed gets to decide what to give credit to as learning, then that renders everyone else's learning that was, learned on the job or learned in the military or learned on their own online, then that's not valuable and it's not recognized. And I think that's a huge problem if we're talking if we make people start over because we didn't give it to them, then that's really exclusionary. And the more we can move in the direction of seeing the value of different forms of learning and whether you did it on your own or on the job or not, then I think that's really a huge shift for higher ed.
Thank you. You want to react? Okay.
En este sentido de la relación entre universidad y sociedad, creo que es muy importante que la universidad se plantee cuál es el modelo de sociedad al que aspira, ¿no? Y no solamente al que sirve. ¿No?
It's very important that the university defines the society that it aspires to, not the one that is serving right now.
Y en ese sentido, ¿qué tipo de ciudadanos profesionales queremos formar para ese tipo de sociedad? Entonces, solamente es insertar al ciudadano en la sociedad o formar profesionales ciudadanos para aportar en la mejora y transformación de esta sociedad. Creo que ahí es...
What kind of citizen we want to form to bring things that are good for that society that we aspire to.
Y me parece muy importante, conocimientos sólidos, ¿no? Profundos, pero también una dimensión ética y socioemocional que te permita tomar decisiones acertadas.
Knowledge is very important, but also ethics and a socio-emotional dimension that will allow you to take good decisions, the right decisions, to make the right decisions. Gracias, Cristina. Thanks. Victoria, do you want to react?
Maybe just quickly, echoing what just Cristina has said, I guess we've worked with the concept of proactivity and reactivity. So universities should be aware of what's going on and try to sort of react and adapt. That's not enough. I mean, at least I believe that's not enough. And there's also this proactive saying we are going to be the institution that think big, that goes 10 years, 20 years, 30 years ahead and think which is the world that we want. Then we need to start building it ourselves from within. And echoing as well Roberta's word about PhDs training, I guess just bringing my own experience, the best 3 weeks of my PhD training were those weeks in which I got a scholarship from the European Commission, and together with another 29 PhD students in Europe, we spent 3 weeks in the University of Aarhus in Denmark, and it was an intensive course on transversal skills. Awesome. Students that we have, you know, astrologists, and we have sociologists, and we have people in business, and we have chemists. So we looked at each other and said, well, it doesn't seem that we have a lot in common. They put us on tables, and they said, like, come up with something that you create together in which each of you brings something. It wasn't easy. It wasn't obvious. And then it was a training in communication skills, in teamwork, in a series of things. I am taking that with me forever. And I know I was very lucky to have that experience, but most PhD students don't have that. And that for me made a huge difference in how even I saw the world and I saw the future, and we see ourselves beyond academics, beyond someone that has to stay and have an academic career. Actually, probably those are the weeks in which I decided, yes, I want to do a PhD. No, I don't want to be a full-time academic.
Great. I wanted to add to what Annelies said about the higher education not recognizing all the learnings that happen outside of the higher education system. I also found that the system is constructed so that most of the professors doesn't believe that the students will learn something if they don't teach it. No? So you cannot, you will not get credit for that because I didn't tell you that. No, so I have to teach it to you in order for you to learn. So I think it's a status quo that's been there for a long time.
Thank you. This is Marlon Breve. I am a rector of a small private university in Honduras. We have about 30,000 students. We look up to 3 Latin American private universities: TEC of Monterrey, University of Los Andes in Colombia, and Catholic University of Chile. The top 3 private universities in Latin America, based on the rankings. And we look up to what TEC is doing. We have evolved into a competency-based academic model, and we have declared explicitly that we're going to work on 6 power or soft skills. And then I keep asking our leaders, how do we make sure that, for instance, if they mapped 2 of those power skills in a certain topic, in a certain class, how do you make sure that the teacher, has that competency? How do you make sure that he can teach or he can develop that competency in the students? And how do you measure that the students develop that competency? So those are dilemmas that we're trying to resolve, but if the faculty does not show that competency, how he can teach it? And how do you make sure that the student learn it? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. It's very interesting that we're talking about the academic. What is it to be an academic? None of us have gone through training of becoming an academic. You just are thrown there because you have a degree. It's one qualification that it's not there. And that's where our problem is. That's why we will always go back to what we are comfortable with. You are talking about being creative, coming up with how to do those kind of things. And we want to measure everything. Things don't have to be measured. Things have to be done in order that you can see that this person actually has those skills. Our assessment practices, for an example, that's an industrial era examination-based things where people were taught to be standardized, to be the same in an industrialized environment. But we still continue to have exams. We still continue to have those kinds of assessment that don't make sense. Teamwork can be an assessment where you put people who have different skills together and say, this is a project, work on a project, and let's see what happens. And things will come out. There will be those that don't want to work, the lazy ones. Then it's up to you, the group, to sort out the lazy ones. But we are going to get 1 mark if you have to get 1 mark. This project has to be successful irrespective of whether there are those that do not do the work and those that do the work. So those are some of the ways on which we can be able to assess. and not necessarily measure what have actually happened. And that's where I think we need to all go to the academic school, be taught how to be an academic, because everything, we teach everybody about everything, but we ourselves, that's why it's difficult for us to be able to do anything, because we learn from these archaic academics, and we behave like them, and we continue with this. Thank you.
There was, Annalisa.
Yeah, I think there are many ways that you could do this, but one that I've come across I think is really interesting in a way that technology can complement what's happening in the classroom is there's a platform, like there's one called Ripen, where it focuses on micro work experience, and it's intended to be done during the course of a class. So let's say you're in graphics design. You can require that each student does this sort of micro project with an employer in the local community, and you go on the platform and they have templates to make it easy for employers to find these little micro experiences. And then you could say, oh, they did their graphics design in one place and they did their other one in this other place. And then in the classroom, you have a conversation where you're asking them to talk about like what they're learning in those opportunities and what some of the challenges are that they're experiencing. And so that's a one, I mean, it's not, it's just like in the overall scheme of, apprenticeship way over here, this is just like, I'm doing a small project in collaboration as a requirement of the class, and then they bring that to the classroom to problem solve around it, and that's one way to actually not only like teach the students but also teach the faculty to hear about what they're experiencing and what they're trying to do in those little micro experiences.
Sí, yo creo que el enfoque de enseñanza y aprendizaje tiene que incorporar el desarrollo de habilidades fuertes o competencias transversales desde la dinámica dentro de clase y fuera de clase, ¿no? Dándole...
The teaching learning model has to incorporate horizontal skills inside and outside of the classroom.
No es un curso aparte o un taller donde yo desarrolle esas habilidades, sino en la dinámica misma del
It's
proceso.
not a special course, it has to be horizontal to all the courses.
Y la evaluación también es parte de ese proceso. Creo que es muy importante ir de prácticas más directivas y centradas en el conocimiento hacia prácticas cada vez más colaborativas y autónomas y centradas en problemas contextuales, ¿no? Donde están cada vez más abiertos esos problemas y el alumno pueda demostrar estas capacidades en el afrontamiento de las soluciones.
Assessment is very important, and we have to move from knowledge to more practice-oriented activities. Sort of.
I was going to go a bit into the technology direction and to say that I am by no means a technology expert. I do struggle myself to keep on with all this technology that is being applied to education, in general higher education. But what is obvious is that these days there are a lot of simulation, like very real simulations possibilities. Gamification is a great way also to be able to not just to get those skills, but also to assess them later. Because I guess and just going back, one step, what we've always struggled with is that encouraging or developing transversal skills is tricky because it gets you out of your comfort zone because they are not easy to assess. Well, I guess technology gives us now the way to be able to develop them, but also to be able to assess them. Virtual reality. Can someone tell me any better way to learn anatomy than actually seeing everything? I mean, that there are things that are very, very, very clear. Platform to make challenges with organizations anywhere in the world. And I guess this is the way in which it will be easier to develop transversal skills, but also to be assessed and quickly to complement. On the company side, now there are also more options to hire based on skills. So it's not about what have you studied, it's what skills you have. So if on the one side we get to develop and then, I won't say certificate, sounds too formal, but accrediting any way or certificate or be able to, to show them to students, so they can show to the world what they know in terms of skill, and then companies can hire also based on skill. Then this whole signaling of the labor market will just become much better.
Thank you. One last question.
I'd like to inject exactly to that, is saying Melanie from the Holy See. I'm heading the recognition office, the international office of the Holy See. And what we see is, yes, we're in a dilemma. On the one hand side, we would like to put things in drawers because you've done this, we have standardized that, we understand this is a first cycle, a master's, a PhD, and so on. So if you ask somebody to describe, he makes this motion, like it's scale up. Nobody says it's a flow of education and it's getting broader or what. So we immediately classify people by stuff. We have recognized in recognition that it's much better to describe, because the more words you use to describe what the qualification is, be it transversal, be it the educational, the more easy for the labor market and for the university is to assess then, is that fitting, is that what I want, is that what I need? And the description is much more open than the assessment, where we struggle to, okay, he has an A and B in something, or 115 points. We don't do anything with that. So the dilemma is standardizing versus describing, and flexibilization versus drawers. So the Holy Father has come up, Pope Francis came up with a global compact on education, and says put the person at the center. So let's just not assess the person and put him in a case, but let's try to let the person describe what he or she has done and then take it from there. That will be my comment to that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and many times also when you're hiring people, you hire them for the skills that are not in the curriculum, you know? So
Yeah, true.
it's also
True.
But it's, well, thanks for your comment. I would like to close with a final question, very short answers also, so we try to finish in time. So if you have the power to change two things in higher education and lifelong learning, what will be those two things? Well, it can be one if you want. It doesn't have to be two. So,
starting with me.
Whoever is ready.
Well,
to make it more innovative, no? To make those changes that we are talking about.
And I know they're going to talk more about higher ed. So I'll repeat the technology pieces, which is open standards and digital rights to data, I think are really pressing challenges, because that technology is surging ahead, and people are using them more and more, but I'm worried about like who's going to control those highways and who's going to make sure that people are not exploited and excluded.
So that means all the information that are on learning systems like Coursera, edX, Linda, and others, that you cannot take that information that is yours because it's your interaction. You cannot take it to other systems because you don't own it. No, that's
right. Like, so if you're on even on LinkedIn, right, and it has algorithms and it's deciding here are the jobs I'm going to offer you. What if it's discriminating?
Exactly.
And giving you less jobs because you don't look like the people that already have that job, right? And then it's tracking every click you make, everything about it knows more about you than you do sometimes, yes, and it's selling that to advertisements many times. So we need to be thinking about protecting people and helping them understand what it means when you say accept all the ever since I came, I've been getting those messages because we're in the EU and they have the GDPR. Yeah. But in the U.S. I never get that. So, that's just who is that really power anyway? Or are we just saying, oh, they're taking my data, okay, accept. But that doesn't actually solve the problem, I think. So anyway, I think that's really a big problem on the horizon.
Thank you, Annalise. Who wants to go next?
I can go, yeah. I think if I have to change two things, I'll change the mission of the university. We need to rethink about who we are, what we are supposed to be doing, and how do we impact the society that we are meant to lead. And secondly, I would bring the humanity back into the education space. We have removed ourselves, we have become disciplinarians, not even disciplines, disciplinarians. we have become something that people cannot identify with, but people can come to us and we'll give them certificates with promises that they will get a job. Half the time they don't, half the time they end up in places that they are not meant to. So I would want us to focus more on the human nature and the humanity and make people human again, and those values will stop wars in this world and they'll bring about the peace we want.
Thank you, Bine. Powerful words. Who wants to? Who wants to the next? Cristina.
Sí, yo creo que es posible, pero hay que, bueno, pensar y hacer y trabajar para ese futuro. Y al menos desde los países de Latinoamérica creo que es muy importante tener políticas públicas definidas y presupuestos, ¿no? Porque creo que todo esto requiere inversión en recursos, en infraestructura, en capacidades humanas también, ¿no?
That future is possible,
Sí.
but in Latin America we need public policies and budget, because we need a lot of resources for that.
Tanto el sistema privado como el sistema público
Both
de
the
educación
private and the
superior,
public
¿no?
system of higher
Necesitan
education
invertir y asegurar calidad, estándares mínimos de calidad para atender la diversidad también, ¿no? La diversidad de poblaciones, de necesidades, de culturas.
Investment and they need investment and standards of quality.
Y creo que es muy importante también desde mi perspectiva invertir en lo que es la formación permanente de profesores y que estén comprometidos con este cambio, ¿no?
Investment to cater to different kinds of students and also investment for training faculties that they have to be committed. Gracias, Cristina. Thanks. Who wants to
Yeah, I
go?
can go next. Because I'll look at it like if I asked Aladdin coming out of his bottle, right, to grant me 2 wishes instead of maybe, what is doable, because I think there are things we can aspire. I would have politicians put education as the fundamental primary policy directive that they would have. They would spend on education what they spend on military, and then the world would be different. So, that. And then the second thing would be that education was grounded in a trusting social environment, that trust was a key relationship builder between societies and educational institutions. And we see in countries where we aspire to their educational models, there's so much trust that underpins every element of that educational system from kindergarten to university, that I would have trust-based relationships between education and society.
Thank you. Victoria?
Oh, a lot of very interesting things were said. Might mention 2 quick things, maybe lines to what I said before about collaboration, and it will be the share of resources. In times of financial struggles or constraints, like we were speaking the other day, Elena, that hard times are coming, and we need to be creative. So why don't we start thinking about what universities can do together, whether it's with other universities or whether it's with other organizations, to just start sharing maybe the more obvious thing like digital platforms, information or databases, maybe with the governments, but maybe infrastructure as well. Now that there is much more online learning, online everything, do we need all that we have, or can we share it? But also knowledge. Universities need to start looking at each other as like they're not competitors of anything, particularly universities that are in completely 2 different parts of the world. Course materials, why not? Let's design better course materials together. And talented lecturers, if they are not available in certain places, is this something that we can share? I think so. Teacher training, I want to emphasize that as well. Recently we have 10 webinars to prepare to come to this conference. Teacher training, no matter what you talk to, came in every single one of them, about not just about how to manage this digital platform, how to develop entrepreneurial and innovative skills, how to integrate transversal skill into the curriculum, how to collaborate among themselves. I guess it's all within this open and collaborative university vision. Be bold, think big, because if universities don't do,
No
we will.
one.
Thank you. So I will add and repeat also what I say. I think that putting the student at the center, it's very important in everything that we do in higher education institutions, systems, curriculum, all the services that are around the student and all the support, and not treating all the students the same, because all students need different kinds of support depending on or what is the context, the history they have, where they come from. So I enjoy a lot this panel. Thanks a lot for being here.
Thank you very much.
Roberta, Cristina, Victoria.
Thank you, Pepe.
Annelies.
Thanks,
and
everyone.
thanks for all for your questions. And for the public that are looking
Thank you.
at the
Thank
distance.
you. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thanks.
Thank you.